Well, hello guys, and glad to have you on board again today. This is another one that I wanted to do for quite some time, even though some of the things that will be mentioned today have been said over and over and over again, just in a lesser perspective in all of the more intraday updates or weekly updates. But the thing is that I never really properly took the appropriate amount of time that this very dense subject requires. Kind of understanding the way I am arbitraging Ethereum and Bitcoin, and without going anywhere, I would like to say and state it very clearly that this video and this type of video can hardly be unbiased, just because, well, no one can be unbiased. And the thing is that I do have this bias on my own personal trading strategy. So full disclosure before going any further, I do hold both Bitcoin and Ethereum, but I do have a bias in the way that I weight them in my portfolio. So my vision in here can hardly be fully neutral. I wish it could be, and even though I will try to do as professional kind of review of this that I could by having a neutral vision based on facts rather than stupid assumptions, we're of course still going to have a look at charts and probabilities. So I'm nothing more but a trader, so please, I have no crystal balls. I do make choices. I try to make the most rational choices based on facts and based on stuff that go far beyond cryptocurrencies themselves. The models and basically the chart models that I use just doesn't nearly rely to just Bitcoin. I haven't created those models just for cryptos. That's something you need to know. All right. So my personal portfolio is weighted 40% Ethereum, 10% Bitcoin, and the rest is on other cryptos. But the thing is that it still means that there is a 4-to-1 ratio in my Ethereum to Bitcoin exposition. Though, even though the argument in here is pretty clear, as I'm going to talk about the Ethereum to Bitcoin strategies, their ratios, and their overtime cycles, I will, of course, state that some informations might be biased, and I would like to state it clearly. I could be wrong, and you just can't copy what I said because for whatever reason it sounds smart or whatever that is, all right? Even the smartest person on earth simply can't predict the future, all right? So please, always do your own research. I'm just trying to expose some facts in here and explain the narratives behind my personal choices. All right, so let's jump in after those disclaimers. Though the thing is that first things that I'd like you guys to understand is that we do have a coordination of cycles, even though they both play kind of the same maturity now. The thing is that the historical behaviors of both of those assets tend to say that the adoption cycle they're through are definitely on different timescales, which means even though there is overlap in the maturity of cycles, there will not outplay in the same way in the future due to the actual relative lag they do have. Let me explain. So the thing is that if you take the adoption curves in here, quite more on the bottom, well, let me just take a purest form of it. All right, though the thing is that everyone knows about these things, all right, it's easy to understand. The key in here is to understand the different type of psychology and maturity of different market participants joining in. The thing is that we're both case scenario, both Ethereum and Bitcoin, living through the chart, which means in their adoption cycle, they're both revolutionary technologies that actually eat on different type of market shares. Bitcoin is more heading into a reserve currency kind of market share to say, yeah, we might have overdone things with the dollars and stuff like that. And well, eventually Bitcoin would be the best possible alternative to kind of settling into maintaining national currencies and their influence over the citizens, kind of having consumption fiat currency systems, where on the other hand, most of the savings will be arbitraged against a stable currency, which could be the Bitcoin, a neutral currency that no one's can print out of nowhere and stuff like that, which could be a safe haven for large holders. Once again, just having a fraction of Bitcoin will make nothing. Instead of just anticipating that transition and trying to buy it, to sell it to some cheaper, to some bigger folks in the future at a profit. But until then, understand that these are two totally different narratives. On the Ethereum end, on the market, the adoption and the targets are definitely not the same. Ethereum are more like kind of a financialist system of itself. It is more like an other country competing with others on the digital end. So this is basically kind of a digital nation that belongs to no one but the ones participating in it. So kind of decentralized online financial system. Definitely two different things, all right? Not to mention the difference in their consensus, the proof of work versus proof of stake, and the natural evolution cycle of these, which we'll argue on as when we look at the on-chain fundamentals. The thing is that it's still clearly, you need to understand that we're here on both of them, which means they both proven to be absolutely technological breakthrough in both of their endgames. They have both been adopted by innovators long time ago. We've already seen the early adopters as well. It's now time to go into the early majority, because we're clearly now living through the chasm, which means this is the moment in which the early adopters and the early market has gone in, but they're getting shaken by the market as more deeper pockets are trying to get their hands into their market that will shift the narratives of those revolutions. This is basically this model that I've mentioned quite a lot, still not translated in English. I wish I could find the time to do it, but still you might be familiar with the translation. The thing is that there's a shift in the psychological management through this cycle, and that happens in every revolution. The disruptors feel like they've taken control, all right? Then the opponents, the kind of old-fashioned way to do things, feel like they're losing control. Then they start to resignate and capitulate, where on the other hand, those who thought they had control start to have nervosity and doubt. The end game is that the old game will be nothing but forced to adapt. So of course some won't adapt, but most of them will. And they will take over some of the control that they lost. At the opposite, of course, of those who thought they disrupted the thing and they changed the game, we put these guys out of office and we've taken their jobs. Well, definitely turns out not to be the case. What we end up with is a hybrid system of both. And the thing is that, of course, those who thought they were taking control are actually losing it, and they feel kind of a delusion phase, when in the end, step 3 and final step is that, well, boy, this was obvious. They're certainly not going to change everything, and they're not going to let it go. So the thing is that definitely this was obvious that we would end up with a hybrid system at the end of the revolution phase. So the thing is that this is where we're in. We're experiencing this kind of delusion phase where the early market adopters are being shaken in a very dangerous psychological management patterns. Manipulation could be actually the word to say, because the mainstream market, which deeper pocket, is just trying to get their hands into these markets because they adapted. All right. So that's the thing that we needed to understand. Okay. What you need to understand, of course, is that there is a relationship, a causation effect on how long this cycle tends to behave, all right? So the longer it took for the early market to put its grip on the market, the longer it takes then for the mainstream market to take over on the next maturity phases, all right? Though, if we put that thing into motion for both Bitcoin and Ethereum, we're going to have to assess that. The Bitcoin has a major lifespan that is far exceeding Ethereum's, okay? So the thing is that, as you can see, the native structure of Bitcoin is an absolute growth in here, which would be, to me, the sign of the early majority and the early adoption. Then comes the shaken phase in here with these different, of course, adoption cycles being spread out by the reduction of supply, which is inherent of Bitcoin halving seasons. Though the thing is that we've seen that cyclical behavior, the 2008 bubble, the I don't know how to call whatever we've experienced in 2021, because, I mean, I still can hardly figure it out. We're still living through the chasm, which means we're just shuffling the supply. And as you can see, we're kind of this equilibrium phase in which in the future I expect Bitcoin transactions to start being rolled at a faster pace because of the blockchain improvement, which you would see in here, the technological breakthrough, because that's the other model that we've pulled out earlier. That was this one, all right? All right, you see that the adoption, this green curve, okay, which is the derivatives of this one. This is a cumulative version of this one below. This thing is fueled by a particular factor that is the S-curve performance breakthrough. This is basically the revolution phase in which there is infinitely, or not infinitely, but exponential improvements on the technicity and technicals of the networks that then fuels the adoption. So the thing is that the further stages of adoption will be preceded by technological breakthrough, both on Ethereum and Bitcoin, but at different scales. Remember that the duration of those cycles are different. Though the thing is that as it is longer for Bitcoin, but still at the same kind of trough maturity preceding the technological breakthrough, I expect those technological breakthrough both on Bitcoin and Ethereum, just on different time scales, all right? So very important for you to understand the different maturities of the cycle. So as Bitcoin, would be today more than 10 years into its own cycle, currently trading at the chasm, okay? When we'll get out of the chasm, the technological breakthrough will probably happen, all right? but they will take a far longer stage than it will eventually be for Ethereum, all right? Though the thing is that I invite you to think about what probable breakthroughs could be. I think one of these would be the average transactions filled in each and every block there is in Bitcoin to be improved over time, slowly, because of course the adoption cycle of Bitcoin is much longer. So the technological improvements of Bitcoins will definitely be part of the game. They will probably take the form of an S-shaped breakout curve, which is first of all going parabolic, and then there is the logarithmic reduction, all right? But they will start to occur, in my humble opinion, in Bitcoin. So we should see an improvement in the number of transactions processed by the blockchain. On the other hand, what we can see, it's pretty significant, is the fact that we can see that the block size has actually started to shift very dramatically. So there are multiple reasons for this, and I would hardly go into too many details, but I think this is also another sign that the Bitcoin blockchain is headed for disruptions. Definitely not the same types of disruptions that will happen in Ethereum, because Bitcoin is fucking slow, and that's exactly what we want it to be. Reserve currencies are not meant to have tremendous types of use cases and the like. They definitely have some use cases. People have been using gold to pay for stuff, but most importantly, they've been using it to save, which means this is untapped money that serves nothing but to just hold its value over time in the store of value principle. So gold has been mostly used for this back then, and I think Bitcoin is entitled to do this in the future. And if that's the case, well, we certainly don't want Bitcoin stuff with full of shit stuff, like doing DeFi on Bitcoin, or more importantly, storing NFTs in here. It makes no fucking sense, but yet, I mean, still, it could be some other use cases like that. Gold back then had multiple use cases. There were jewelry, there were kind of art doing with gold, but most of the general fucking gold was mined and used for store of value. So basically just put it into safe places and actually serving no purpose, but just store value. Though we'll see all about that. If Bitcoin is the same adoption, it's going to take longer than that, because if we have more than 10 years preceding the chasm, then that means we're still due for probably 6 to 7 years at least until we reach the tipping top of the maturity phase. Okay, remember these same adoption cycles we're in? If we're here today, that means we're still probably have almost more than half of what's passed before ahead of us. So if we're 12 years in, expect that there's at least 6 to 7 years ahead of us until we reach the tipping top of the actual maturity on these adoption cycles. All right? Same old thing in here, signs that there is a recovery on Bitcoin. I can hardly say it. I know so many people still think the bear market is not over for whatever stupid reason. On-chain metrics all suggested, on-chain valuation metrics suggested that a major bottom has been made on Bitcoin. Of course, we still wait for the technicals to confirm, but until then, all the fundamentals said it was. The adoption here is already being said in here. That's being due to the fact, and to me, if you look at the transaction fees paid in Bitcoin, you can see the uptick in here, which is the sign to me that adoption has already started to rise. The supply is still programmatically being reduced. Same old story. You can reduce the supply immediately or just keep it the way it is. As long as demand grows, the price will go up. All right, on Ethereum's side, well, this is a different type of beast. Ethereum has a far less longer type of experience in the market, so the adoption cycle in here would be more visible into, first of all, try to think of one very important thing, okay? I can hardly stress that how important it is, all right? But so many people just have some stupid, absolutely stupid mindset just because they don't think of it through. So take a second and think about it. What is a blockchain technology? Distributed ledger, or whatever you want to call that, all right? The thing is that this is public open source. Okay, so public blockchain means the transactions are visible. Open source, meaning anybody can join the network. There are sure a thing, obviously some technical, also, some fundamental limitations on who can participate actively on the network. When it comes to Bitcoin, well, you have to burn a shit ton of energy if you want to participate in block production. And for Ethereum, you're going to have a shit ton of capital if you want to have some block rewards. That's exactly the same story in both ends. But the thing is, there are still these things. Open fucking source technology, anybody can join, even though there are some limitations. But the thing is, if you think it through for a second, distributed open source technology, put it into the future, they can only do one thing. And you cannot disagree with the conclusion that I'm going to say. There's no way you can disagree. It can only lead to specialization, meaning the more of these distributed open source technology you want to create, the more specialized they're going to have to be. There is no way two can compete. They are distributed open fucking source, meaning one will always win over its competitor. It's really the way it is. And as it is subsetted as a distributed technology itself, there's no need for competition. It's the winner takes all. That's the way it is. It can only lead to specialization. So if multiple blockchains, a distributed ledger technology, have to live all together in an ecosystem of blockchain, they have to specialize, and there's no way it can exist any other way, all right? It's really pure logic in here, so you can't disagree with that. Multiple blockchain will force blockchain to specialize. And this is the trend that we've seen recently, okay? So every blockchain you have, if it wants to be sustainable over time, has to be the best at doing what it does. Otherwise, competition will take it over, all right? Though, what is it that Bitcoin does best? Like we've seen, storing value, burning energy, being tied to real energy burn. It's very slow in its development, and that could be an advantage at some point. And it is meant to be a store of value in the end. So the transaction throughput isn't meant to be tremendously big. It's actually quite the opposite around. We want it to be minimalistic. On the other hand, Ethereum is competing against Bitcoin by doing something that Bitcoin can do or doesn't do. It's being fast and offering programmability and stuff like that. But we all know what Ethereum is. Both will likely cooperate because they do two different things, and they can actually hybridize, which means some of Bitcoin's pros can combine with Ethereum pros by having some kind of joint ventures of both, like kind of systems using both Ethereum's security and scalability advantage over Bitcoin's security and slow pace of evolution. Though we'll see multiple hybridizations of both, signs that actually both of them have been going through revolutionary pathways. So it is not a Bitcoin revolution and the rest is full of shit like Bitcoin maximalists could defend, just like Ethereum's maxis would say, well, Bitcoin is too old, that was old daddy, thank you, now we're going to take over. Well, this is really not the case. I think both will subsist because both have different endgames. The thing is, don't be dumb. They have just different adoption cycles. If we want to think of adoption of Ethereum, well, what is it that Ethereum does best and that no one else can do for it? Like we stated, first of all, Ethereum was this general computation that was meant to be doing everything, NFTs, DeFi, and now decentralized identity, and we can save the world with Ethereum. Like we stated, it's not going to make it. Multiple other blockchains will tap into these narratives one by one, and some of them will be better at Ethereum, forcing it to specialize. So what is it now that we've seen a full blown up cycle, which Ethereum is currently going through the chasm as well, which means all of the early structure of what Ethereum will be tomorrow is probably visible today. What is Ethereum? Ethereum is a settlement layer. Ethereum sells the actual security of its proof of stake. So this is what it does. Ethereum does no longer do everything. Everything is processed on Ethereum, and it derives its security, which is something that for now any other blockchain has failed to try attempting deriving Ethereum for. Ethereum now does it better than anyone else due to its market cap. All right, so Ethereum is scaling, and the adoption of its security is visible through the number of other blockchains that actually use Ethereum security, aka Layer 2. And we can clearly see the adoptions has started to go. Nope, sorry about that. And like we stated, what we want to see to be proof of the actual breakthrough, remember this is when the thing go S-curve, all right, we want to see this parabolic shaped curve. And that's exactly what we start to see in adoption of layer 2s. As you can see, we've got step sequence in here, which all goes as the next stage is shorter than the previous one, and the growth tend to be going further and further away. So it is still speculative at that point, but if this trend keeps on going, well, you can clearly imagine that the transactions per second being processed on layer 2, deriving from the security of layer 1, will keep on increasing in this parabolic S-shaped curve that we know of, which is the sign of a breakthrough. That means Ethereum will separate forever from every competitor trying to attempt selling security like it does. It will forever be the smartest, the best way to do it, all right? But that's the thing, Ethereum specialized, which is the sign that it will probably be there for a long time, and its adoption cycle is further down the line, is closer down the line, and this adoption cycle which is in is far shorter. Ethereum has a far shorter lifespan, and its adoption has been quicker than it is for Bitcoin, which means there's one very important thing you need to understand at that point, is that even though both are experiencing the chasm right now, all right, which is this kind of truth of delusionment area, which is basically corresponding to the revolutionary cycle of the disillusion that we've seen as well, all of them tend to say this is where today both Bitcoin and Ethereum are. The thing is that Ethereum already see the sign of the acceleration phase of its technological breakthrough through the adoptions of layer 2s, and technological breakthrough will be rippled through all of those layer 2s, which all inherit the security of Ethereum. They'll demand the blocks by aka, well, you know the drill. They'll demand for prices, and limited supply can only push prices up. And this will further down the road trickle adoption. Remember that adoption comes from the technological breakthrough. These are the things that precede the general public's adoption, all right? But on Bitcoin, even though we're in the same place, the duration, the path that's behind us to lead us to that point is far longer than it is for Ethereum, which means the path onward is also longer. All right? You have to understand that, all right? Which means in terms of adoption cycle, the adoption and therefore the price structure of ETH is likely on a totally different scale than it is for Bitcoin. All right? That's really important for you to understand. That means now if I couple that thing with another thing that I use for cyclical perceptions of market risks and investment cycles, well, basically I use the economic confidence model of Martin Armstrong, and basically in here tells me that we're in an upside cycle of confidence in the economy more generally, and a commodity move in here until 2024, somewhere around April next year. So this thing tells me then the corrective cycle would show up in an authoritarian, that's interesting, and then I actually get a peak in West, which means probably the actual capital bubble will explode at that point. The major debt cycle, which lasts for 70 years, will terminate out of this area, and another cycle will emerge afterwards, which they say likely going to be a shift to China. We'll see all about that. But until then, well, that gives me two things. I have two cycles that tend to correspond with the previous model. We've seen Ethereum's adoption could cycle around this cycle, which means it could last until 2024 and the like. This is just an estimation, so of course, don't be too stupid to call it that the day in which the market reverses, but pretty much the area in which the confidence starts to deteriorate, so market tops are likely going to happen. On the other hand, we see that there is another cycle topping in 2032, which is more in line with the adoption cycle that we're in for Bitcoin. So I would tend to say I personally play both in two different timescales. I think Ethereum's adoption will be quicker. The adoption and the technological breakthrough will be quicker as well, which means the growth cycle will probably lead to faster valuations in the short run, but then a stabilization, because what the adoption cycle says is that it's not a one-way trip in which the market creates just a bubble and then retrace. It's really installing value and prices to a higher standard. And remember that Ethereum is going to be deflationary once its adoption will be maximal. Though expect Ethereum prices to keep rising, because there's also going to be constant development on the blockchain to keep improving its tech stack, which means the adoption still pursue, the actual hype around the project starts to decrease, but it's compensated by this natural evolution and the fact that, of course, deflationary pressure on the token will keep on rising prices. So Ethereum is on a long ride to the upside. It will have its own speculative cycle, of course, of demand being speculatively anticipated, but the thing is that the value over time should keep increasing in terms of Ethereum. But the thing is that it's a different timescale for Bitcoin. If we have a look at this, if we do it for Ethereum, and if we circle around what we've stated, the next cycle, on shorter term cycle, could terminate halfway through to 2024. So if we study the actual structure of Ethereum on these general timescales, that will be putting ourselves into a weekly chart context. This is where I use my longer term price analysis, which doesn't necessarily have been created for Bitcoins or Ethereum. Remember, I use this model on every available price structure. As long as the supply isn't too much diluted, it works just fine for both stocks, stock indices, whatever. It's just a speculative framework. and I can hardly go all the details if you don't know my strategy. So the thing is, in here, Ethereum's strategy, if it is a trend, and like we stated, with all the fundamentals shows that there is a trend because there is a technological breakthrough ahead of us, and this is a revolution. Basically, Ethereum changed the game on how we can process transactions, though it really isn't going to change the whole world and fuck all the banking system, but it's going to hybridize and merge with it, all right? But it is a revolution. The thing is that though we can hardly imagine anything but a trend for this thing, the value of Ethereum will have to find an equilibrium level. And the way we get through this area A into settling into another area B can only be done with some specific ways. Now, this is what my strategy tells me. There are multiple ways we can go out there, but Ethereum tend to have made its choice towards the Wave 5 extended structure, which has nothing to do with Wave stuff. It's just inspired of it, so I took the name. For transparency purposes. But the thing is that we do have this overlap, which means that we have both breakouts in here, and both the breakout levels are being revisited in here. The second one means that we go for a trend and we immediately reverse bullish to bearish. It means the trends just fail to settle itself. We go right back down to the previous level, which is where the overlap settles, and we find the rising moving averages below us, which means we're in exact area in which the 0.4 of a Wave 5 extended structure of my strategy extrapolates. The next phase can take multiple times, can take endless times to get there, but all I know is that whenever we attempt to go back to the all-time high, it's going to be excessively broken up, which means the trend will be expressed in its final stage, meaning in here we're going to get sufficient demand on insufficient supply. This is where prices will go absolutely bonkers, because there will be organic demand, people buying the fucking thing, not just for the sake of future revolutions, but just because it's fucking happening and I want to be part of it, and there's just not enough supply, which is exactly what Ethereum has gone through. Oversupply in its early phases, high inflation, and now that the inflation is actually turning to deflation with the recent upgrades, well, if adoption shows up, I can definitely tell you it's going to be exponential. It's going to be excessive, but it's not going to be a bubble. It's going to go up, 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 because that's what Wave 5 does. I don't know how high it's going to go. People can go with their own forecasts and stuff. My personal most favorite one is that I hardly think it's going to be anywhere below 9K. Could top at 14K, and I hardly think it can go much higher than that. But of course, this is supply and demand. The supply is known and is limited. You cannot create fake Ethereum. There are real Ethereums and there are derivative markets which can create in limited numbers of them. But if people want the real thing, they can't be created out of nowhere. Though in that sense, if the demand is outpacing supply, God knows how high it goes. But the thing is that, well, once we found the tipping top and once the market stabilizes and find its B value area, we're going to settle the value, which means don't even think we're going to go back to where we are now in the future. It's not going to make it. If we go up, it's a one-way trip, and then the value will stabilize. And remember, we're still going to have a deflationary tokenomics and a pursued improvement of the network, which means the long-term value is going up. It's not going down. But the most of the trend will have been done, all right? The craziest spots of finding the value of Ethereum will probably be reached, because remember, once you figured out the adoption cycle, you will understand that most of the price action terminates when the adoption curve is spiking, which means when we're past 50% of people using it, when we've terminated the early majority adoption, when just the laggards are going to be part of joining the network, all right? Now, this is really what you need to understand. So it corroborates my kind of longer-term cycles, which says, well, kind of this intermediary mid-2024 cycle could coincide with Ethereum's final adoption by a market anticipating the breakouts and then all of the laggards kind of joining in. On the opposite hand, well, for Bitcoin's price structure, we can see in here that, well, one could say we've got this same thing. I mean, look at it. We're going bonkers in here, but it certainly doesn't retrace to the breakout level. In Bitcoin, the breakout level was in here in December 2016, and we never gone back there. So this is not the Wave 5 extent. It's totally different. Even though in here we retrace to the same old 2018 market top, it's not the same pattern to me. It's different. And moreover, god damn it, what the hell is going on in here? I can barely see the fucking price chart. So that means I have to go logarithmic scale. And if ever you switch a chart to log, there can only be one way. Truly disruptive technology. That means one chart can go parabolic and using log scale only if there is growth in the rate of growth of adoption. So this can only, if it lasts through long durations like that, it can only be disruptive technologies. And the thing is that these things just can't go on forever. The number one mistake is that I see people doing linear analysis on logarithmic scale trade. It's not going to make it. The thing is that these revolutions have a limited side of adoption, which means anyhow and anyway, there will be some reduction to the log renderings of these things. They won't go to 2 billions or whatever. Like we stated, Bitcoin isn't going to destroy the financial system. They will not destroy fiat currencies. They will still be there years from now. But the thing is that Bitcoin will likely take the lead on being the store of value. No more safe dollars, no more dollar reserve currencies or yuan reserve currency. There's going to be one for the international trades, and it's going to be Bitcoin. At least that's what I see. Could be wrong. So like I said, there are still risks, but damn it, when you see these kinds of adoption curves, I hardly think these things can be reversed. So on that sense, what we have in here is a truly long-term parabolic log scale adoption phase, which is, it's going to take long to figure out its way in. And like we stated, in terms of Bitcoin, we have estimated that 32 is the likely end of the adoption, the kind of topping level in which Bitcoin finds its end value. So now if you do this, and if you try to do these things and extrapolating a future in here, though, first of all, it's very dangerous because like we stated, there are multiple sub-cycles we can clearly identify to be linked to the supply reduction of Bitcoin. So there is both a supply mechanic and a demand mechanic for Bitcoin. Actually, turns out so far the demand cycle has been fueled by multiple bubbles, okay, and the thing is that the supply mechanics has been fueled by the halvings, and what you can see is that actually both of them tend to coincide, which means the speculative phase starts right after the halvings and the like, okay? Future, we'll see if we keep on going that way, but if we do, there's one thing I can tell you for sure: if you ever make linear analysis on these types of things, you're going to be fucked. Which means if you try to assess that, well, the future for Bitcoin is to go trade these parallel trend channels, so oh boy, 2,000 at least by the next halving, I would say maybe, but I disagree with that because I've rarely seen these adoption cycles going linear. They always have this kind of reduction. They still keep on going up. Each and every cycle will break the previous high and the previous low will be maintained because we never make new lows in these adoption cycles until we terminate it. So Bitcoin will have ascending bottoms and ascending tops until 2022 and 2032 for me. The thing is that until then, we need to stabilize its value. My personal assumption is the bare minimum for Bitcoin prices in 2032 would be at least 200K, which leads me to believe that over time, well, the bottoms will be ascending, the tops will as well, and over time, the volatility will reduce until we stabilize price to, I don't know whatever level will be, but it's a bare minimum 200K to me. But all that's a far off in the future. Though the thing is that if we can't or hardly can manage into making linear forecasts, which means this cycle, which should top around mid-2024, right when the halving shows up, by the way, we can hardly imagine linear analysis, though that means the 200K target feels unlikely to me, or at least not as likely as it could be. Though if that's the case, I would go for any lower target, and one that is very visible to me is the 120 to 30K area, which seems pretty reasonable to me as a market top. That also means the next corrective cycle for Bitcoin could be very low. And remember what we stated, it's going to be an authoritarian cycle, which makes a lot of sense of retaining Bitcoin value by avoiding having fiat currencies in your portfolio, which means even though we would have a corrective cycle on both cryptos and general assets, I think Bitcoin demand will probably make its price being sustained against against fiat currencies. Though on that sense, I think even though we could have a limited upside potential for Bitcoin, in terms of relative performance, it's still pretty fucking great. I mean, if we take the reference value and the mid-side range in here, taking 20K as a reference, going right up to 120 and 30, the thing is that, well, that's still a 5x, which is pretty great. I think in terms of return for investment makes kind of a lot of sense. That's pretty great. All right. And in that sense, we would have a lesser type of correction that more disruptive things like Ethereum, who play their game on the shorter time frames, could actually suffer quite some withdrawal effect when the actual adoption parabolic scheme phase kind of terminates. All right? But on the Ethereum end, like we stated, the rewards could be totally different yielded. Because like we stated, I think personally, random lower target to me would be a 14 to 15K for Bitcoin, for Ethereum. And of course, if the demand outpaces the supply, we can go much, much further than than that. So in that sense, I would say Ethereum's return, if you take the average value of latest traded coin, that would be a $1,300 Ethereum, going right up to somewhere around, like we stated, go for 12K. It is a 9x return. So this is higher return for Ethereum than there will be for Bitcoin on the forthcoming cycle. Like we stated, Bitcoin's adoption is much longer, and Bitcoin final target could be much higher, followed by different cycle, which each of them yield lesser reward, but still high highs and high lows because the adoption is far from being over. All right? So very important to understand now. Now if we'll plug that whole thing together in a single chart to kind of study whatever the fuck could happen out of the Ethereum Bitcoin chart, and the reason why I'm personally overweighting Ethereum on this cycle, and this, if you got the point, will likely going to change by the end of the 2024's upcycle. At the end of this cycle, I will likely probably start taking some profits on my Ethereum to upscale the weighting of my Bitcoin's portfolio, which is currently standing at a 4-to-1 ratio against Ethereum. All right. Though the recent events have been switching that a bit because my Ethereum weighting has gone down as my Bitcoin has gone up. So in the short run, this downside consolidation in the Ethereum Bitcoin chart has kind of just reweighted slowly but steadily the portfolio. But still, the long run area still seems to me that due to the things that we've mentioned, the faster adoption of Ethereum, the fact that the metrics on Ethereum show that the fucking parabolic scheme could actually be there, which means the adoption will follow right after, though the things might come sooner rather than later for Ethereum, and could be correlated with the upcoming cycle terminating around mid-2024, which means despite the fact that so many people say, yeah, we're going to wait, the next bull run is not going to start until the halving because that's what the Bitcoin cycle does, and no one can disrupt the Bitcoin cycle. Like I said, Bitcoin and Ethereum do totally different things. Their adoption cycle are totally disproportionately different. So in that perspective, it makes no sense to me to say Ethereum has to wait the next halving to bull run. No, it's not making any sense. First of all, we've seen that the actual confidence cycle model says the cycle terminates by the halving. So it very likely shows to me that Ethereum is going to lead the game, and Bitcoin, as its own disruption showing signs, but on a much slower pace, will probably follow. So my model says Ethereum will likely overperform Bitcoin. So the question to me is, why the heck do we have the opposite reactions in prices recently? Though, of course, there's the narrative of bank run, so Bitcoin safety narrative, stuff like that. But does it really make sense? Or is it just a sign of a forthcoming longer duration in which Ethereum underperforms, and basically I am wrong with my assumptions, my models are just wrong? Or is it just that? Though I will try to answer this by looking at the technicals on this chart. So the first of all, we need to figure out the appropriate time frame. Though in here, monthly chart doesn't really have that much history. It still shows that we're in an up cycle in which the bottom hasn't gone right down to the support context. So I would say lack of history in here, as the number of boundaries are too limited. Though I will go for the last appropriate time frame that I can go on, which will be the weekly chart. Though in here, we can clearly see that there is an asymmetric stuff. We see that this is not a trend because there is not sustained moment in which the market is trending, but we can clearly see that the context succeed trading above the rising moving average. They fail trading below a falling moving average, which is the sign that there is a bias in this range. This is what we call bullish range, which means it's still ranging. There's not going to be a trend in here because trends, as you can see, cannot be sustained. There's also one other metric that I tend to use in ranges, that they have the nasty tendency to tend to behave into a couple of waves, which means 2 waves to the upside, 2 waves to the downside, and 2 waves to the upsides are expected to come. What we can say as well is that the upside waves have more prone probabilities to break above the resisting context than the opposite ones. As you can see, on the consolidative waves, when we try to break the context, we generally find a reversal in here. We try to break in here, bam, reversal. We try to break in here, bam, reversal. But on the other hand, the bullish cycle have the probability to break above this. So these all things, if I sum them all, it means to me there is still a second cycle to go in the upside direction. This cycle will have likelier chances to succeed trading above these areas. All right. So worst case scenario would be this is just a big neutral range, and therefore I would use my DOM model, which means this is where I will probably lock on some gains or eventually forecast potential reversal. But that this one seems more like a bullish range, which means there are more bullish strength than the bearish consolidative waves. Then I suspect this one has tiny but still chances to trade in price discovery, which means Ethereum far outpacing the Bitcoin prices due to massive adoptions and stuff like that. And this would probably be a narrative like, yeah, we don't need Bitcoin. I mean, look what we can do with Ethereum. Ethereum is so great. Ethereum is much faster, is much this, much that, much more. No, like we stated, we need both. The thing is that don't be dumb enough to follow the potential flippening narratives and stuff like that. Even though it may happen, if it happens, that probably be the sign of overextensive bullishness on Ethereum, might be the sign to start eventually doing the opposite way of that trade. Meaning starting to swap some Ethereum to go back into Bitcoin safety. That is my personal plan. If it goes bonkers in terms of Ethereum adoption and like we don't need Bitcoin anymore, I think that would be the appropriate time to start going on the opposite side of that trade by taking some profits and swapping my overweighted Ethereum portfolio back into some more Bitcoin, kind of re-weighting Bitcoin in the portfolio in a relative manner. All right? So that is my plan. And if you got it all right, well, you understand that I don't nearly pay attention to this area. I think Ethereum will overperform the December 2021 market top relative to Bitcoin. It will likely have no problems accelerating in this area where there will likely be very limited resistances, very limited price history to stop there. But the thing is that if this red area doesn't stop us, and I will be very careful in here, if this area doesn't stop us, well, we're going to go price discovery. How high? God damn it, I don't know. It's probably going to be the same old stupid narrative like we don't need Bitcoin, it's all about Ethereum, just buy Ethereum, it's deflationary, it's going to save the world, we don't need euros, we don't need dollars, we can do all DeFi in Ethereum. Well, boys, if that ever happens, you know this is an appropriate time to start reweighting your portfolios. More importantly, if just like me, you've been having very aggressive overweighting of Ethereum. Remember, I am in a 4-to-1 ratio currently. So that means if Bitcoins are overperformed by Ethereums in the cycle, this shift that I have of a 4-to-1 will severely increase to a 6 to a 6 or 7-to-1. And if that's the case, well, there will be an appropriate time to me to start going against the narrative and start to profit taking and reweighting more Bitcoins, going more of a safer approach. Like I stated, you already know when this is likely going to happen. To me, when it starts to go all around mid-2024, just the moment in which the economic confidence model shows the peak is likely going to show up, and that shit could start to be around the corner, and lack of confidence or losing confidence in the economics and the economic environment could start to show up. And if that's the case, then that's the moment to me, I think. Moreover, if we head into an authoritarian consolidation cycle, damn it, Bitcoin could be a better bet than Ethereum. I just think it's a matter of time series. At which moment in time do we want to overweight this one or this one? I think both Ethereum and Bitcoin will be part of the future. Just have to weight them according to the relative position in the cycle. The relative faster adoption cycle of Ethereum plus the actual visible on-chain metrics that the revolution might be more mature now with the beginning of parabolic skimming curves on L2 beats have to be confirmed. I don't know the future. Maybe this is just full of shit. But if these trends continue, that's the sign that anyhow and anyway, whether you like it or not, the S curve is going on. That means adoption will be there. And if the adoption goes there, it will probably follow suit with the longer but still adoption cycle going on as well with Bitcoin. But the Ethereum one will likely terminate faster and sooner. All right? Which means, to me, overweighting Ethereum is why I do this, all right? It's how I play it. Though the final question is, the hell do I do with the current price area? As you can see, we're trying to retrace to a lower Bollinger Band. I mean, we're trying to trade lower boundaries of volatility in terms of weighting of Ethereum being weak against Bitcoin. When I said multiple metrics suggest the value of Ethereum is supposed to rise faster than Bitcoin. So normally, the fundamental says the opposite. So I should be concerned because there are two outcomes. Either this is just, well, timing assumptions, we're just saving some time in a range and I'll be proven right later on, or I'm just blind wrong. And in that perspective, well, like a trader always does, I am making a choice. My choice is clearly being expressed in the way I weighted my portfolio, but I, of course, will assess the probability of being proven wrong. So if I am wrong, where could this thing go? I think the longest we could eventually go for is, like we stated, we can hardly trade below the rising moving averages in here, so I don't even think there is a possibility to even go bearish below those levels. We would be having a further down consolidation, and in that perspective, despite trading extreme volatility, the market, if for whatever reason Bitcoin sometimes really go like the safe bet against the turmoil in banking sectors, which I definitely think is bullshit, because we're in a rising confidence cycle economic. This is just a model, so everything can happen, but I don't think there's going to be an economic collapse. And if it doesn't, well, I think the current short-term narrative of everything's going to fall apart just by Bitcoin, I think it's going to fade away, and we're going to go back to growth, and Ethereum's growth is outpacing Bitcoin's. Though, in that sense, potentially, well, we're going to reverse in this area. Other thing is that, as you can see, the bottom or the top in here has been built out of the Bollinger Bands, which means we don't have to get there. We could just reverse in here and build kind of a consolidation triangle, which means high highs, lower highs. We consolidate until the second trending phase goes breaking the previous resistance. Or, like I said, we can retrace right down to the support context, but it can't break, because remember the thing, we will likely trade above the resistant context, very unlikely we'll trade below the support context. All right? Just like back then, we haven't gone down to the support context to build the intermediate consolidation. So I think the worst we could do is going out there before going there. Of course, that means if we go there, I am fucked. That means I was wrong. That means I need to review my entire narrative and scenario. I need to review the weightings. That doesn't mean I'm going to take a massive loss. That just means I wouldn't have made the smartest choice in capital allocation. If this goes out there, that means I was wrong. Those who overweighted Bitcoin instead of Ethereum would have been right. All right? That certainly doesn't mean I'm going to reverse my trade. It just means I was wrong. All right? So I have to understand that. Anyway, it's been a 45-minute video long. Now I think you have everything to understand the choices that I've made. That certainly doesn't mean, and I'm going to state that again, I stated that as an introduction and I'll do it again as a conclusion. Never trade according to someone else's vision or whatever reason. I expressed all the deep analysis that I have in mind just to show you the granularity of the decision-making process that I have. And to be honest, I have far more to say than just here. I just try to sum up the core essentials to show you how I base my decisions on rationals, and I look at the metrics to confirm these things. And then in the end, it's all but speculative, which means I could be wrong. And if I am, I'm gonna have charts proving me wrong. All right? Until then, try to make your own decisions. What I'm trying to say here is that for whatever reason, if you've made the opposite bet, like I'm full on Bitcoin and very low on Ethereum, there are areas in which you can reweight the portfolios. The area which we're in could be one. Right? Okay? The second area is you should really think about it. If for whatever reason Bitcoin keeps overperforming Ethereum in the longer run and goes right down to this area, boys, that would be a sign in which I would say just look outside of Bitcoin Max's narratives. There are not just Bitcoins around, and there are some very interesting things happening elsewhere, and it would be damn great for you guys if full of Bitcoin to have some cheap related Ethereum to Bitcoin prices. But to be honest, I doubt we're going out there. Technicals doesn't suggest that. We're pretty much already going down in a significant pace, and we're already reaching out the trade lines, which means the bulls can take over control at any time now. Shapella is down the road, and like we stated, the path of evolution of Ethereum is much faster than Bitcoin. Not because the Ethereum devs are so great, it's just because Bitcoin's inherent nature is to be slow and resilient. That's what will make its success over time. That's actually made by design. Though I would say lots of time series analysis suggests Ethereum's adoption will be faster, but it will also terminate faster as well. So in terms of allocation, I think Ethereum is better now, but it's going to have to be reversed at the end of this cycle, because in the longer run, Bitcoin still will have its game to play until 2031. And the next corrective cycle being authoritarian, yeah, I think there's going to be an attempt to crack down on Ethereum. So I'd rather like to go back to safe daddy Bitcoin and reweight my portfolio. I will always have both Ethereums and Bitcoin. The question I'm trying to answer here is, at which point in time am I going to overweight this one or this one? At least now I think you have that answer. That's enough for today. Guys, I hope you've learned something valuable. That being said, see you later. Bye-bye.